Well, hi, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. My guest today is Becky Margiotta. She is the author of the #1 best-selling book titled Impact with Integrity: Repairing the World Without Breaking Yourself. She's also co-founder and owner of the Billions Institute, and she's the host of the Unleashing Social Change podcast. So you can learn more about the Billions Institute at billionsinstitute.com. Their mission is to help leaders scale solutions to the world's biggest problems at record-breaking speeds. Becky is also a West Point graduate and served for 9 years as an Army officer. So Becky, thank you first off for your service and thanks for being here. How are you?
Mark, thank you for having me. And I'm doing really well this morning. Thank you.
Great. There's a lot we can talk about here today, but as we typically do, as we'll dive into the main question at hand, from different aspects of your career, of different things that you've done. What would you say is your favorite mistake?
As all of your guests have said, there are many to choose from. And my favorite one, the one that really I continue to draw upon the lessons and help many, many other social entrepreneurs, social change leaders not make the mistakes I made, was thinking I'd get an A for effort. And another way to say that would be not managing to outcomes, but just managing to effort, essentially. And they're very different things. And I really two glaring stories where I made this mistake. And it's night and day, the difference of managing to outcome versus getting an A for effort.
So, within that general theme, what can you tell us at least one of the examples, one of the stories where, that sort of illustrated and how did you realize that you were doing that? How did you discover the mistake?
Yeah. So the backstory on that was in the early 2000s, I worked for an organization called Community Solutions. And my job was to get street homelessness down by 87% by 2/3 in 3 years. We got it down by 87% in 4 years. And then for the next 2 years after that, cities all over the country wanted our help in how do we adapt what you had figured out in Times Square of New York City. And after 2 years of helping other cities do it, we decided to be more ambitious. And so Roseanne Haggerty, my boss, and I came up and crafted this thing called the 100,000 Homes campaign. And the idea was to help way more cities than we had already helped, to the point where they would be able to directly off the streets, by name, move people directly into housing, resolve their homelessness. And we launched this campaign in 2009. And my mentor, co-founder of the Billions Institute, Joe McCannon, his first question to us, because he was our consultant on this project, was, how are you going to make sure you celebrate along the way? And celebration is so important. So I said, you know what? When the 10,000th person moves into housing, I'm going to get a tattoo with the last zero missing.
Yeah.
And I am not a tattoo person, but I got you.
For those who are watching on YouTube, there we go, 10,000. Well, actually, it was a 100,00.
Yes.
So really leaving that space. I mean, the comma was a commitment, right? Without the comma, not so much, right?
No, I had so many people come up to me and just sort of, shriek that I had gotten, one of those ill-fated tattoos and I had this big joke of like, I've got skin in the game. I'm really committed. And, if we don't succeed in this, then I'll just have a permanent testament to failure, on my body. But I always thought we'd get to the 100,000, because everything just kind of always works out somehow. And I was really busy. Yeah.
Well, and to that point, that sounds very outcomes driven. You had an outcome in mind.
Totally. Like on my body.
Right.
Someone was like, that's some good job security, Becky, get a tattoo. See? And so I was all in, I was all committed, but I got so busy just doing the work. And, but I was the team leader. I was, it was my responsibility. And it was about a year and a half into the 3-year campaign where we had enough resources to have someone who could do good quality assurance. And Paul Howard pulled me aside one day and he's like, Becky, I got some bad news for you. And I was like, oh no, what is it? And he said, well, right now we're on track to be the 30,000 Homes campaign. And I was like, "What? I have this tattoo. We can't."
It's harder to turn the 1 into a 3.
It would not work. It would
Yeah.
not work. Yeah, and w it was just one of those moments where I was like, if I'm honest with myself, we reconfigured. We needed another year. We completely refigured our operations as a team together. We problem solved. We were able to sort it out. But the truth of the matter is up until that point, everybody who moved into housing, I was happy and cheering and glad and
Right.
excited and I was working my face off.
Yeah.
But I hadn't really looked. Like occasionally I would look and I'd
Mhm.
be like, how do you project these things? I don't know. But my boss accurately referred to the pre 30,000 homes campaign days as clowns on the bus because
Mm.
we were having a
Ouch.
great time. We
Uh,
were working really hard. We had great camaraderie, great morale. People say it's the best team they've ever been on. It was a wonderful thing. But once we got serious about managing the outcomes,
mhm.
everything changed. It was still had great
Yeah.
morale, all that stuff, but it forced us to be creative and resilient and adaptive in ways. If we hadn't been managing to those outcomes,
Mhm.
we would have had maybe 1/10
Yeah.
the impact in the world.
Yeah. I mean, that's a fascinating scenario there of picking that outcome. I mean, it sounds like what I hear you saying is you lost track of the outcome,
Yeah, I should have
focusing
been
on
looking
the
at that.
effort.
I should have been looking at that outcome
Well,
every day, if not
but
every week,
were you wearing long sleeve shirts or something? I mean,
I was all in emotionally and
yeah.
spiritually and everything. And it's not my particular area of genius or skill to do more of the quantitative stuff.
Mhm.
It was someone else's that when we hired him, he did that and no problem. But I should have. I, sh- I, what we really teach people now is at the very worst once a month, but ideally at least once a week, you're looking at your key outcome measures and
Mhm.
you're recalibrating because reality shifts all the time. You learn new things all the time. So it's not that you change your goal, you change your strategy and your tactics so that
Right.
you can hit that goal.
Right.
So it was it was it's my favorite mistake because I learned so much and I know in my being the gestalt, the feeling of the difference of what it's like to be on a team that
Mhm.
single-mindedly we were always driven towards the goal, but is managing to the goal.
Mhm.
You can
Yeah.
have the goal in
Right.
your hearts, which is different from having the goal in your operations and management.
Right. Yeah, I mean, well, so then first off, so I've got a lot of follow-up questions, so I would love to ask, but when did you get that last zero? Hold the tattoo up again if you
Oh
would,
yeah.
for those who are watching. And those who are listening, I'll narrate, there's a red zero
Hmm.
at the end there, where now it does say 100,000 homes.
Yeah, I got that in June of 2014. 11 months behind schedule.
Yeah.
But you know what? When you're doing something really bold and ambitious and you have a quantifiable time-bound goal that no one thinks you're
Mhm.
really going to hit anyways, if you need one more year, that's really not a problem.
Sure. Yeah.
But you got to hit it eventually. So we
Yeah.
we hit it 1 year late or 1 month early from our revised timeline. And I went and got that tattoo. Yeah.
Yeah. 11 months late is yeah, you're right. Better than never. And I can think of other. Well, two quick stories come to mind. I remember related to the work that I do as a consultant. I had a chance to go visit a hospital. There was a team there that was focused on process improvement, continuous improvement, and they've
Hmm.
been doing this for about 5 years. And I asked, I wasn't trying to put anyone on the spot. It wasn't in front of a large group of people, thankfully. But I asked, so with all of this effort, how would you gauge the outcomes? What impact have you had on the hospital and different things you could measure? And that person paused, and then I was sorry I'd asked the question. The answer was, we've been focusing on building capabilities,
Hmm.
which, I mean, fine, but my concern is that if some point the CEO asks, so what have you accomplished? And that's the answer, they might not get a sixth year
Exactly.
if they weren't focusing both on what they were doing and outcomes and keeping that in balance. I think that's a very That's a mistake people make a lot. We can
Oh
coach
yeah.
through it.
Oh yeah. Well, and so the best compliment when you're working on a project like that, a quality improvement project, is when the boss comes to you and says, "This is going so great. What do you want to do next?"
Right.
And you've already
Right.
got the pitch of like, well, this is how we can capitalize this on this, and certainly building capacity is important, but that's not going to get you the what do you want to do next.
Right. It might not earn you the right. So when you talk about learning lessons from this, and I do want to come back to the story of what you did here a little bit, but thinking of the Billions Institute and things that you do
Mm-hmm.
to help other, I love the phrase social entrepreneurs who are trying to solve really important, really big challenges. Is that coaching that you give them? Is it better to set what might seem like an audacious goal, at least to try to rally everybody behind?
100%. So we teach social change leaders, social entrepreneurs, our model for unleashing, and which is we define success as orchestrating the loss of control of thousands of people moving in the desired direction. And so it's a art and a science, and it's a quan. And the key that brings it to life is a bold, quantifiable, time bound aim. And we, in our trainings, we teach people how to get it just right. The Cliff Notes version of that is any system can withstand an expansion of 5 to 10 times over the same period of time. So, if we helped 1,000 people move off the streets into housing last year, then in the same time period in the next year, if we're going to scale, we should aim for between 5,000 and 10,000. And I've trained thousands of people on how to set good aims
Mhm.
that are this fine-tuned balance between overwhelming people
Mhm.
and freaking them out. Underwhelming, right? You don't, it's got to be enough to get out of bed in the morning.
Yeah.
And people really get this wrong. The aim setting piece, they're either really grandiose, way in the future, you know, like we're going to do something like really amazing by 2030. And you're like, who's still
Yeah.
going to be here? Or they it's the quality improvement itis where they're like, we're going to do something really incremental so we don't fail,
Yeah.
and nobody cares. And so we try to help people find a balance between those two.
Well, and if I remember right, you said the goal for reducing homelessness was by 2/3 was the goal that was set.
So this is where I learned I should have learned that lesson the other time. So
Yeah. Okay.
sometimes we have to learn lessons twice. So listen, I had gotten dumped by the person I was dating, and my puppy died, and I was like just depressed and all sad. And I was like, I have to do something I feel zero ambivalence about. I was actually a stockbroker at the time.
Mm.
And I found my way to Community Solutions. Roseanne Haggerty took pity on me, and for whatever reason thought a military veteran would be a suitable leader to reduce street homelessness by 2/3 in 3 years in Times Square. I knew nothing about homelessness, but my job was to get street homelessness down by 2/3 in 3 years in Times Square, the highest density of street homelessness in New York City at the time.
But and it sounds like though they were identifying a leader, right? So
That's
leadership matters a lot, even if you don't. I mean, you can learn the area that you're working in, maybe not to be a world class expert, but learn enough to lead effectively.
I think so. I think that's ultimately Roseanne thought she wanted a logistician because there were 30 other organizations that were doing something to help the homeless people in that area, or the people experiencing homelessness, I should say. But it wasn't resulting in any outcome changes. So she thought she wanted a logistician, which I was not. But she was like, "Well, you were military, that'll do." But I was like, "But you got a leader." And I figured out the
Mhm.
other stuff pretty fast. And I had beginner's mind. So I was like, it
Yeah.
doesn't seem like what y'all are doing is working. I wasn't popular, but I didn't
Sure.
care.
Yeah.
And again, it's the same story. And I hope I don't make this mistake again. I mean, it's just like, you always ask your guests, like, okay, what did you learn differently? And I'm like, well, I'm just going to do it again. But when I was in Times Square, um, Roseanne was like, Becky, you get street homelessness down by 2/3 in 3 years. Let me know what you need. And we got to work and we started moving people directly from the streets into housing, which was unheard of at the time. The only other person
Right.
who'd been doing this was Dr. Samson Barris. And so we thought we were like doing heroes work. So we were like high-fiving each other every day, again, working our faces off. But we only went out and measured our progress once a year. There's a point in time homeless count mandated by Housing and Urban Development. You'd go out in January. It's always like the third week of January when it's really cold out, not so that you can get an undercount. People get cynical about this. It's because most people probably are inside that night. So it's kind of easier to count the number of people who are outside. And
Okay.
so, but you get the totality of everybody, but there's usually less people sleeping outside in January. So you're not overwhelmed, right? And so,
Oh.
we only measured outcomes once a year. She hired me to get it down by 2/3 in 3 years. I should have been sampling that at least once a month, you know?
Yeah.
And
And
and at the time when we would be counting, which is between midnight and 4 AM.
yeah.
So
That's,
we were just housing people left and right, but we weren't making a dent in who was actually sleeping outside it between midnight and 4 AM. So we worked our faces off for a year and homelessness went up 17%. And Roseanne could have been like, she knew I was working really hard. She could have been like, hey, A for effort, Becky. But she was like, I hired you to get straight homelessness down by 2/3 of 3 years.
well,
And again, that's where all of the major innovations and insights came from, was really my boss holding me accountable to outcomes and then me and my team figuring it out.
yeah. And I mean, it sounds like, I mean, I'm guessing in a place like New York City, more so than Los Angeles. I've lived in Los Angeles recently.
Mm-hmm.
I bet there's more seasonality in
Mm-hmm.
the number of people sleeping on the streets as the year goes on. So as that's, I could see why you would do that kind of apples to apples, big apple, big apples to big
Uh-huh.
apples
I love it.
comparison.
Good
I mean,
one.
it was a mistake to make a corny joke in the middle of talking about something seriously. But January to January, like you could see, you wouldn't be claiming success because the numbers change, because they always change. Maybe as it gets warmer, LA has such consistent weather. You probably don't
Yes.
have that factor. But I mean, it sounds like, back to the goal setting though. That 2/3 was audacious enough to be challenging and inspiring, where a goal of incrementalism, 5% improvement. I mean, okay,
Yeah.
that's something, but it might not spark the creativity. And then, as you said, that 2/3 goal led to actually 87% performance. Do you think it would have been disheartening or a mistake to say our goal is zero homelessness in 5 years?
Well, given that we didn't have any baseline data at that point, we had comps in the United Kingdom, which was a sort of federally funded top down, lots more formal power. We were bottom up, grassroots, good looks and personality, right? Which you can see how far that got me. So, because we didn't have any baseline data, going for zero at that point might have been kind of pushed it too far. But because the 100,000 Homes campaign did succeed, everybody went to Roseanne and my former colleagues. I went off and formed a Billions Institute, but Roseanne and all my former teammates, and said, what do you want to do next? And what they wanted to do next was say, instead of working with cities out lots and lots of people and running the numbers up, we'd actually like to work with a smaller subset of communities that want to go all the way to zero.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and in fact, they just got that group, the Community Solutions, just got the MacArthur 100 million and change award. So the
Oh.
MacArthur Foundation puts out $100 million grant for like a big idea that can actually solve a problem all the way.
Mm-hmm.
So they've got tons of wind in their sails, but all of that is building upon the work from Times Square and then other cities, and then the 100,000 Homes campaign, and then the Built for Zero campaign, and now this. Now they're going to get it's these iterations of scale, and you build upon the last thing you did, but you keep the pedal to the metal.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think zero is an interesting goal. Like I have a ball cap here that says zero
Oh,
written out. I should have been wearing it maybe, but this is from a group called the Patient Safety Movement Foundation, a nonprofit, and
yeah.
they are audacious in setting a goal of zero patient harm.
Wow.
And that's currently a big problem, and it's hard to measure or estimate. But there are organizations, like in the domain I'm in the most, in healthcare, that will set a target of zero harm to staff and providers, zero
Mm-hmm.
harm to patients, but recognizing we're not going to get there immediately. We might not ever get all the way there, But if we're finding 50% improvement a year, that's worth celebrating and builds momentum to keep going. So I've seen
Absolutely.
where that zero goal maybe is the right goal. But I think this comes back down to leadership again. Can you articulate it in a way that doesn't make people roll their eyes and say, well, that's impossible, versus working together with them to figure it out? As you were saying, you had to figure it out with the 100,000 Homes Project.
Yeah, I think if people dismiss it as impossible, you don't have that win in your sales. I love zero stuff. And by the way, my mentor, my co-founder is Joe McCannon
Mhm.
from the Institute of Healthcare Improvement. And so
Oh, okay.
he worked
Mhm.
really hard on the 100,000 Lives campaign, which
Yep.
then led to the 5 million
Ah.
incidents of harm campaign.
Mhm.
Um, and from what I understand about quality improvement, if you say we're going to get to zero, and the way we're going to get there is we're going to half our way to perfection every single year. We're going to keep on improving upon our improvement, and it's going to be a parabola. We're going to approach,
Right,
but
right.
maybe not hit zero. But if we're going to get it to a really acceptable level. I think that's really exciting,
Yeah.
and charismatic.
Well, that's a funny connection. To, like I said, IHI 100,000 Lives campaign. They're another great nonprofit education that's trying to help drive change that way. I saw a thing in the news the other day. City of Hoboken, New Jersey, has had a
Hmm.
campaign of zero deaths from pedestrian car accidents, and I think they've been at zero for 4 straight years now.
Oh,
And
wow.
I think it takes leadership, kind of putting that stake in the ground. And then
Hmm.
this was on NPR. The brilliant thing that was, they said all the different solutions, none of them were really that expensive. It was just more a matter of doing things, right, and
Hmm.
not looking for the single magical fix, which I think we tend to do, looking for the solution, like whether
Yeah.
it's technology or
Yes.
something really innovative. Lots of little, just sort of grinded out improvements that led to that great impact.
I think you're hitting on something that I feel is so important. I'm going to change the way I teach large scale change. So I used to
Hmm.
teach it, what's your solution? So for me, it would be, we have a way of identifying people at a high risk for dying on the streets, and we have a way of expediting them through the Rube Goldberg machine that is the housing placement, not processed in the United States. So, like, let me spread that, right? And people fall in love with their solution,
Yeah, it's a
and
risk. Yeah.
and kind of lose sight of the problem they're trying to solve sometimes, or whatever. So now, right after that, I would teach them aim setting. But this next time I'm teaching in the UK for 3 weeks in September. The next time I teach this, I'm going to teach aims first. Like,
Hmm.
what's the impact you want to make in the world? What's the
Yeah.
change? And then, okay, what
Right.
are like the 3 to 5 possible solutions
Hmm.
you might spread and scale?
Right.
And we'll see how that goes. But I think that you and I are like drinking the same Kool-Aid here, that
Yeah.
we can't get too attached to our solutions because reality changes all the time.
Sure.
We learn new things.
Yeah. Well, we're speaking very similar language. When IHI teaches their model for improvement, it does start with setting an aim statement. But as I've had the chance to try to coach people, I think we have to be careful that we're not stating the solution, where the aim is to implement such and such. Like, well, wait a minute. I think a better
Yes.
statement is, like you said, we aim to reduce patient falls by 85%.
And we're
Now
going to
let's
do that
figure out,
lots of ways.
yeah, let's figure out the causes, and let's figure out things that we can go and test and see. And
Yes.
it might not be the solution. It may be this package of different solutions that get you there.
And when you talk it out with people, like, I'm sure, you work with your clients, a majority of my work right now is with the National Health Service in England. And
Mm,
so they all have improvement projects,
right.
that they've got something cool. But it's very rare for people to commit to outcomes. So I had a group coming through, and they had this really wonderful something or another that reduced macular degeneration,
Mhm.
and they wanted to do some incremental change, sharing, improvement thing. And I was like, talk to me, what's your thing in plain language? Talk to me like I'm an eighth grader. And they're like, well, we basically prevent blindness. And I was like, dude, instead of being like, we're going to spread our blah, blah, blah,
Mhm.
jargony, whatever thing
Yeah,
in some incremental percentage thing, why don't you say, we're going to prevent blindness for 2,000 people this summer? You know what I
sure.
mean? And,
Yeah.
and, they're like, "Oh, I like that better." And I'm like, "I just said the same thing you were saying." But there
But
is
yeah,
they get it, right? Everyone
yeah.
gets it. But sometimes we need to help them shift, get out of their
Mhm,
day-to-day and
mhm.
shift to these outcomes a little bit more uh persuasively.
Yeah, or to have the clarity and the simplicity. Like I saw a thing, meme that was going around recently. It was something like, if you can't describe your job in 3 words or less, you have a BS job, right?
Yeah.
So I might run the risk then of having this label of like, I have a BS job. But
Uh-huh.
maybe if you can't describe your aim in a way that some random person in the supermarket could understand, maybe you're overcomplicating things.
Well, and boy, do we do that, right?
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
a mistake to avoid, or a mistake that a lot of us have made. So Becky, talking about, speaking of big numbers, I want to learn a little bit, I want us to hear, what is the Billions Institute? Why did you co-found it? And then
Yeah.
you like big round numbers. So why billion or billions? What's that? What's that
Yeah,
about?
we could have called it like lots of zeros. So Joe had already quarterbacked and led the 100,000 Lives campaign for IHI and Don Berwick
Yeah.
when Roseanne and I met with Joe and Don Berwick to learn how to do a campaign with lots of zeros after it. IHI seconded Joe to
Mm,
consult and coach me how to do large scale change. Then he like set me on my training wheels off to go. And he went and worked for the Obama administration for several years, rolling out Obamacare, big large scale change within the government.
yeah.
But when the 100,000 Homes campaign was over and he was finishing up his rollout Obamacare gig at HHS, um, we touched base again. We had been friends all those years. And I was like, hey, I really want to help people learn how to do large scale change, but I want to work with climate change, education, racial justice, all these different human trafficking. Let's stop gun
Mhm,
violence. Let's take what we learned and help people in other things that we really, really care about do large scale change better.
mhm.
And Joe was like, I'm totally in.
Yeah.
And we literally the next day I called him back and I was like, you want to go into business together? And he was like, heck yeah.
Yes.
So we founded the Billions Institute together and we hung out a shingle. A lot of people wanted us to consult for them, but my heart is really with training. And
Mhm,
we were very busy consulting, and then we kind of carved out enough time to start doing this our large scale our large scale trade. What am I saying? Our large scale change training,
mhm,
and it's just grown from there.
mhm.
That's primarily what I do now is help people design and lead large scale change.
Yeah. So people who are trying to do some sort of big audacious initiative in their city, in their state, in their country, they're trying to figure out how to structure it, how to get started, or maybe how to course correct if they're not
Yes.
seeing progress. They find you, or you find them, or both.
Yeah, a lot of word of mouth, and we're there. This is all we do, and so this is our niche. This is so I can listen to someone for 15, 20 minutes and be like, okay, here's what you're doing wrong.
Yeah.
you know, like I
How,
just and so it's easy, because we know the bones, we know the parts, and yeah.
how's that received though when you say, here's what you're doing wrong? And hopefully they're open to the input, or maybe you're just saying that very
I
loosely, or
don't really say it that way. I think
okay.
I would say something like, first I would do reflective listening and say, okay, do I understand your situation correctly? And do I
Mhm.
understand your pain point? This is the
Yeah.
part that's hurting. And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, okay, are you open? Are you available for another way of seeing this?
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Are you for a different possibility for how this might look, or a different way that you might get what you really want? And then if they
Uh,
say yes, then I'm like, okay, well, what if,
right.
and I'll put out a possibility. And so
Yeah.
that's usually how that goes. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you have to hope people are open to it. Sometimes there's a risk when people are looking for they say they're looking for input or ideas. Sometimes they're really looking for validation. I'm like, oh,
Hmm.
the way you're doing it is fine. Keep going. It's going to take more time, or just do it a little bit.
Oh,
And
yeah. I think what I do is I think I'm if nothing, I'm very authentic. And so I think I loved your interview with your professor from MIT who
Yeah,
did the airline authenticity, of
Arnie Barnett.
I'll drop some truth bombs on folks, you know what I mean? But I do it gently, and then I think folks really appreciate that. Um, but I think it's also really important to validate the effort, right? Like I think nobody calls me because they really want to make their large scale change project work and they're just phoning it in. Like they're really sincerely working hard and wanting to succeed. So it
Yeah.
is important to validate the effort, I think, and then say, here's how you could redirect that effort and have different outcomes, maybe worth a try, maybe.
Yeah. I mean, there's always things that are going well that you want to keep doing more of, even. And then there are things that you could change. I mean, that's I think it's true if you're coming into a hospital or to any organization trying to understand the current state. It's usually not all bad.
Oh no, there's so much to build upon.
Yeah.
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 And I would say at least half of the time, and this is what I write about in my book, half the time when someone calls me, they already know their truth.
Hmm.
They just haven't given themselves permission to acknowledge it even to themselves, much less
Mhm.
somebody else. You know what I mean? Like they know that something's not working. They know that, there's a relationship that's a little bit off or a resource that's missing, but someone else has it, or you know what I mean? Like there's just like something that
Mhm.
and it's like they do need, or I don't know if they need it, but one of the ways I feel like I'm really helpful to people is helping them access what is true for them
Mhm.
that they weren't giving themselves permission to say out loud.
Mm.
And then it's like, okay, well now we just got to figure out what to do about this, right? Like, but at
Yeah.
least we know.
Yeah.
And people are smart. People's intuition, people's sense of what's going on is generally pretty good.
Yeah. And one of my previous guests, this is going back a ways. How did she put it? I think she said her mistake was relying too much on outside experts instead of finding the answer with them. And
Hmm.
maybe there's a balance there where you're right. A good coach isn't going to be as direct in saying, "Well, here's what you need to do. Just go do it." Because
Hmm.
then that trigger that can trigger defensiveness, and I think that's a perfectly
Yeah.
normal human response. So this kind of
Yeah.
like this co-creation
Oh, totally.
or drawing it out and maybe even asking questions like, well, if you think here's an approach that you think would work, how would you test that? There's a startup
Yes.
question. What assumptions would have to be true? There's different things you could try to maybe bring someone to the confidence level where they can go try that idea.
Amen. I think it's all about helping people find their inner truth and then helping them see opportunities or openings that maybe weren't as clear to them before. I have a great story about how people don't want the answer.
Mm,
In our trainings,
yeah,
we do, like you're a consultant, they have like little like tricky things to do with tennis balls or Mr. Potato Head or whatever, and teams have
yeah.
to learn something and do something to succeed at the challenge. So, we incorporate that into our trainings to help for a specific purpose, not for quality improvement, but for spread and scale. It's an adaptation of one of those consultancy type of things.
Mhm.
So as the last time I did it, I was in Wales, National Health Service, room of 100 people, teams of 8, utter chaos, tennis balls everywhere. And I am observing so that we can use these as teaching points, right? I just set people loose to let the chaos begin. And a woman comes running up to the front of the room and she's like, "Can I use the microphone? Can I use the microphone?" And I'm like, "Yeah," right? Because I'm always like, this is the most exciting part of the
Yeah,
training because I don't know
right.
what is going to happen,
Yeah.
right? And I'm like, "Sure." And she goes up to the microphone and she's like, tap, 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 tap. And she's like, "Everybody, everybody, everybody, listen. The right way to do it is X."
The right
And
way to do it is what?
she gave away the answer
Oh,
of
oh, oh, oh,
she's
okay.
like
Of the
how to
exercise.
solve the
Yeah, right.
puzzle for
Yeah.
everybody because she had done it before. Okay. And I'm watching it. And I'm like, well, this is interesting,
Yeah,
and I'm like, is this going to just ruin the whole thing? And now
yeah.
everybody's going to have the right answer. And we're just is going to be a boring exercise. People booed.
Yeah.
People were like, we don't want to know the right answer from you. We want to struggle.
Yeah.
It was the most fascinating thing. So
Wow.
it just validates your point that people don't want to be given the answer. They want to find their answer within.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that is that yeah, that's a great story. It's a surprising
Hmm.
outcome from that. So Becky, I did want to ask a little bit, back to your education, your training, your experience in the U.S. Army and the Special Forces. I mean, what are the most transferable leadership comments? There are many books that have been written by retired generals and people from the military, and lessons from the special forces, and there's kind of a appealing popular notion out there.
Right.
But if you were to sort of try to cut through all of it, are there, from your experience, what would you say are certain key lessons of the approach to, let's say, developing leaders, or the approach to leading, that we should most want to emulate or learn from?
That's a great question. One quick clarification was I served in special operations, and people who were actually in special forces would take umbrage at a woman being in special forces. Although women can be in special forces now. But back when I was in special operations command. But it's so simple and it's so basic, but it's so everything, which is mission first, troops always. Which is outcomes. Right. Get the job done first and take care of your people, because they're the ones who are going to get the job done.
Right.
And when I was a cadet at West Point, every time, once a week, you'd go into the mess hall, 4,000 people eating at lunch at once, and there'd be a handout of Lieutenant X, and it would describe some ethical dilemma or some scenario you might face when you're a lieutenant, and it would be the lunch table conversation about what would you do in this scenario. And the right answer to every Lieutenant X conundrum was mission first, troops always, and because they're competing. Sometimes there's trade-offs in those. But I think an enduring commitment to mission first, troops always is so transferable to the civilian sector. As I told you in my story, sometimes I take my eye off the ball because I'm busy, I'm working, I'm productive, but it is definitely a balance.
Yeah, a powerful notion there. Just to repeat it back, mission first, troops always. That's powerful. And you mentioned outcomes focus. I think probably the only book that I've read from one of the retired generals was Stanley McChrystal, very popular.
Oh yeah,
Team of Teams.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
And I will do my best to paraphrase a concept, but then I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. This idea that post 9/11, different enemy than the military maybe had been training for in decades past, that this notion of commander's intent was so powerful, of not the play-by-play of do this, then do that, then do that, but expressing the commander's intent and then letting people kind of figure out some of the how, maybe within some parameters. Can you tell us about that?
Oh my God, I'm so excited you brought that up. Okay, so first of all, when I went into Special Operations Command, first woman to ever command a company in Special Operations Command, the 112th Signal Battalion, Special Operations Airborne. Wow. My boss was Colonel Howie Cohen, and the person who had been his biggest mentor, who had most shaped him, and he was the person who most shaped me, was General McChrystal when they were in the Ranger Regiment together. And so I think of myself as coming from the McChrystal lineage in my time of service.
Oh, great.
So in a way, indirectly, through Howie Cohen, who I'm still dear friends with, I was shaped by General McChrystal's things. The team of teams and the commander's intent, what's wonderful, this is another thing that's actually brilliant about the military, is there's a commander's intent, which is, here's the end state. We know once the bullets start flying, this is going to go out the window, but we've got to have a plan, just because, it's better than not having, but even when the plan goes out the window, this is where you need to be. And it's everything in the Army is written to an 8th grade literacy level, and everything in the Army is done in case your boss dies. Like they're literally taking into recognition, your boss could die, so you need to know what to do. And then you're a boss, you could die, your people need to know what to do. And that's where so much of the agility, I think, of the military intentionally, but that whole concept of commander's intent is 100% resonant with our model for unleashing in the civilian world. It's like, here's where we're going. We're going to course correct until we get there. We're going to commit to this end state that, like, how could we even commit to this? Because we can't control that, right? But we're going to keep on improving and vectoring in until we get there, and we're going to learn as we go. And we're going to unleash all these other people we've never met. to do things that really matter to them. And they're very complementary ideas in really different contexts.
And that's how you end up having a hope of impacting billions of people or having billions of dollars of impact, is not commanding every specific thing to do, but following a model more like that commander's intent. Yeah. Or
Exactly.
model
100%.
for unleashing. Want to go look that up, and I encourage
Yeah.
people to check that out. They can learn more about that. Look for that phrase on the Billions Institute website.
We've got stuff there. Yep. And Joe and I are going to write that book together next. We will write a book on the model for unleashing.
Oh, well, that'd be great. So, previous book, and I apologize for not budgeting time well enough to ask you more about it, but I do want to mention Becky's book, Impact with Integrity: Repairing the World Without Breaking Yourself, to go and check that out. And then wherever you're listening to this podcast, I'm sure you can check out the Unleashing Social Change podcast. I encourage people to go find that. So again, our guest has been Becky Margiotta. Becky, this has been such a good conversation. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for indulging me on kind of sharing a couple stories back.
Yeah, likewise.
Things, but any kind of, I don't. This feels like a lazy, open-ended question to end with. But do you have any? Do you have any final thoughts that you'd want to share?
I think I think almost everybody, I don't know that I've met anybody that doesn't have something that they care about, that some way they want to contribute to making the world a better place. Like, I've never met anybody who's like, I just want to make money and take care of myself and heck with everyone else. Like, everyone has, it might be the sea turtles, it might be, something really far away, or the atmosphere. Everyone's got something they care about. And my hope is that we can consistently take action from our essence, from our most creative selves, and be able to really connect authentically with others, so that we can just kind of chip away at making the world a better place together. And so many people kind of get burnt out doing that, even as volunteers. They're like, this is not fun, because of drama or whatever. And so my wish for the world would be that whatever it is that any listener they care about, that they're able to make a difference in that in a way that supports their own aliveness and well-being too, that it's not an either or, it's a both and.
Well, thank you for that, and I think we'll end on that note. So, Becky, thank you again. Thank you for the work that you've done and the impact that you've had, and thank you so much for being a guest and sharing some of your stories, your reflections, great advice. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, Mark. Lovely to be on their show.
Yeah.